It's time for the fifth quarter on your home of the Blazers. Rip City Radio 620, presented by Frost Brewed Coors Light.
And Sidy Cissoko clapping his hands, getting the crowd fired up, and that's why Rip City loves Rip City.
Call the fifth quarter now at 503-248-0620 or share your thoughts on the game now by texting the Rip City Radio text line at 88528. Here is your host, Chris Burkhardt.
Welcoming you into the fifth quarter. I'm your host, Brendan Slaughter, filling in for Chris Burkhardt tonight, and we're coming to you live following Portland's 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls in the Windy City. The Blazers start off the road trip 1-0. Pleased to welcome you guys into the fifth quarter. You can join the conversation on Rip City Radio, YouTube, or call in the show, 503-248-0620. We want to hear from you. Let's take a look back at how this one shook out with the Rip City recap. Portland Trailblazers get the 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls, and a bit of an interesting game and a bit of an interesting lineup for the Trailblazers in this one with no Donovan Clingan. We talked about it on Blazers game day as he was questionable with an illness. He ended up not getting to go tonight, and the Blazers elected to go small with a lineup of Toumani Camara at center, followed by Chris Murray, Scoot Henderson, Drew Holiday, and Jeremy Grant. First time the Blazers rocked that lineup this year, and it kind of turned out to be a bit of an interesting first quarter in the sense that Scoot Henderson picked up a couple quick fouls. Jeremy Grant picked up a couple quick fouls. The game was tied at 8 at the first time out, and the Blazers were ultimately able to get a little bit of a cushion with a 9-0 run that gave them a 22-17 advantage. The back-and-forth nature of game continued. Chicago responded, taking a 32-27 lead with a minute 30 left, and ultimately the Bulls led 34-32 after the first quarter. Blazers had 7 points from Toumani Camara in the first quarter, but 7 Blazers overall scored in the first. Kind of that balanced scoring, seeing who was going to take the load tonight. The Bulls, meanwhile, were led by the 8 points from Isaac Okoro, 7 from Matas Buzelis, and 7 from Tre Jones. They got to the line a lot, and free throws were certainly a reason for the Bulls having that first quarter lead, but the Blazers identified that and moved on as the game went, and Chicago ended up getting to the line a lot less than that first quarter. Chicago led 34-32 before the back and forth continued in the second quarter. Vit Krejci was able to heat up for the Blazers in the second. They took a 44-40 lead with the Bulls time out after a Vit 3. He was up to 11 points and 3 made threes. This was one of those games where I thought he looked really comfortable, obviously getting more and more acclimated to the Blazers system as time goes, but I thought Vit had a pretty good game in this matchup. We'll talk about his overall contribution a little bit later. The Blazers did kind of struggle beyond the arc in this game with the exception of Vit. The Bulls went on an 11-0 run, one of their bigger runs of the game, to give them a 51-44 advantage. There in the second quarter, it was the largest lead of the night for them to that point, and Chicago was still getting to the line. Portland had some ground to make up. Partially into the second quarter, Chicago was 12 of 17 from the line. Portland just 5 of 6. The Blazers, however, went on a 9-0 run of their own to take a 55-51 advantage, and then one of the true highlights of the first half happened when Portland was able to get a long-range pass from Matisse Thybulle and then a Jeremy Grant dunk, and it was kind of plays like that that helped Portland maintain a little bit of an edge. But going back to the nature of the game, Sidy Cissoko came in. He had 3 fouls in that second quarter. Jeremy Grant moved up to 3 fouls. Scoot still had his second foul and ultimately picked up his third a little bit later as well. The Bulls tied the game at 55 with just under 4 minutes left, and there was movement and momentum for the Chicago in that first half. They didn't necessarily look like a team that had lost 10 in a row, and you got to credit to them. Obviously, they fought Portland to the bitter end in this one and made everything very tough on the Blazers. Portland ultimately would lead 69-63 at the half, winning the quarter 37-29 at the half. The Blazers were led by the 16 from Jeremy Grant, Vit Krejci with 11, and then 10 each from Toumani and Scoot. Without Donovan Clingan and his rebounding prowess in this game, I was curious to see where the boards would come from the Blazers, but they were led by Rob 6 at the half, but 9 other Blazers had at least 1 board, so a real team effort there. Bulls, meanwhile, led by the 15 from Tre Jones, 13 from Matas Buzelis, and 10 from Isaac Okoro at the half. Moving along to the third quarter, again, as we mentioned, Scoot Henderson picks up that third foul in the third quarter. The Bulls open on a 5-0 run. They make it just 1 point, and that was really the nature of this game, kind of that back and forth. But I identify early on in that third quarter, Tiago Splitter called a timeout with the Bulls leading 72-71. The Bulls had been on an 8-2 run to start the second half, and Tiago Splitter was simply not happy, and it was a moment he kind of called his team together. And from that moment is, I think, where we saw the Blazers kind of lock in and be a little bit more disciplined on both sides of the ball, and we saw them kind of be able to build out a lead that turned out to ultimately be enough to hold off the Bulls in this game. Again, I don't know how hard the Bulls were attempting to win the game down the stretch, but they certainly made Portland earn this win, and that's certainly not something you expect from a team that's lost 10 in a row. But back to the third quarter, after that timeout, Josh Giddey hit a deep three to tie the game at 75, and Rob Williams responded with a dunk to push it to 77-75. A Sidy Cissoko three makes it an 87-80 game with under 4 minutes to go, followed by arguably the play of the night, which was a tomahawk Toumani Camara jam, 89-80, and the Blazers were able to go on a 9-0 run to make it 91-80. That was sort of when Portland was able to start getting their momentum and get a double-digit extended lead. The Blazers did lead 93-86 after three. Their largest lead was 11. They won the quarter 24-23, and after three, Jeremy Grant was up to 21 points for the Trailblazers, and the Blazers in that third quarter were able to make the free throw numbers a lot closer, and ultimately they won at the line with some late free throws and attempted just one more than the Bulls. But you were starting to see where that transition happened for the Blazers. They extended their advantage to 99-88 early in the fourth quarter after Vit Krejci and one. Blake Wesley got a goaltending call, and the Blazers had their largest lead of the night with 103-90 with just over 9 minutes left. Another Wesley bucket made it 15 points, and from there the Blazers kind of looked to be in the driver's seat leading up by 15 points. The Bulls had a couple more runs left in them. They were able to ultimately trim this down to a 108-103 game with under 4 to go. Bulls then push it to 108-105, and there for a minute when it was a 3-point game, it was definitely hanging in the balance. Blazers were able to get a huge three from Jeremy Grant to make it 111-105. That was the 25th point for Jeremy Grant, and it was the first made three-pointer for the Blazers in the fourth quarter. A big-time bucket from Jeremy Grant. Chris Murray followed with a dunk, and the Blazers got some breathing room at 113-105. A tough step back from Jrue Holiday pushed it to 115-107, and ultimately the Bulls still had a few more buckets left in them, but the Blazers close it out and get the 121-112 victory, improving to 29-31 on the year, 13-16 on the road, and 8 Blazers reach double-digit scoring. And again, led by the 27 points from Jeremy Grant, 5 boards and 2 assists. Toumani Camara with 16 points, 6 of 6 from the line for Toumani, 5 boards and 2 assists, 10 each for Jrue Holiday and Chris Murray. Murray with 5 rebounds and 3 assists. Jrue Holiday with 3 rebounds and 7 assists. Scoot Henderson in the starting lineup, 12 points, 3 boards, and 4 assists. Off the bench, a big night for Robert Williams III, playing a big role, obviously, with the Blazers going a little bit smaller in their starting lineup, but 23 minutes played for Rob, 14 minutes, 14 rebounds, also had an assist and 3 blocks, 2 steals. Definitely a big-time night for Rob Williams. Matisse Thybulle plays 12 minutes. He scores 5 points, also has 3 boards and 2 blocks. Matisse blocked a couple three-pointers in this game. Vit Krejci with 14 points, as we talked about, 5 of 10 from the floor, 3 of 8 from 3, 3 rebounds and 2 assists. I felt like this was one of Vit's better games with the Trailblazers, and I think this is kind of the impact he can have moving forward, being a really consistent shooter on a night where the Blazers didn't shoot all that well from three-point range. 10 points for Blake Wesley. He also chipped in 4 assists, and then Sidy Cissoko with 3 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. On the other side of the floor, the Bulls were led by the 20 points from Matas Buzelis. He also had 7 rebounds and 4 assists. 12 points for Isaac Okoro, 6 points for Gershon Yabusele, and 5 rebounds. 10 points for Colin Sexton in addition to 3 assists. Josh Giddey with 15 points, 6 rebounds, and 9 assists. Leonard Miller with 11 off the bench. Nick Richards with 14 and 10, off the bench for the Chicago Bulls, and then Trey Jones, one of the bigger nights for him on the year, 19 points, 3 boards, and 4 assists. Rob Dillingham had 5 points, 2 boards, and 5 assists. Some of the team stats from this one, the Bulls actually outshot the Blazers. They go 50% from the floor, 40 of 80. Blazers go 42 of 95, but you see there the Blazers had 15 more shot attempts. Both teams were cold from three-point range in this one. Blazers go just 10 of 46, 22%. The Bulls, 9 of 30 for 30%. And as we mentioned, the Blazers did win the free throw battle. They go 27 of 31 compared to the 23 of 30 for the Bulls. But again, the Blazers had some attempts down the stretch as the Bulls were prolonging the game to an extent. But overall, that's certainly some good numbers for the Trailblazers. They win the rebounding battle as well, 45 to 41, including a 15 to 6 advantage on the offensive glass. And you might think without Donovan Clingan, the Blazers wouldn't have such an advantage in 0 rebounds, and that was big for Portland tonight. Overall, they win the rebounding battle +4, as I mentioned. Chicago coming into the night, they were top 7 in the NBA in assists per game. They racked up 29 assists in this game, beat the Blazers by 2 in that regard. 10 steals for the Portland Trailblazers, 8 for the Chicago Bulls, and then 12 turnovers for the Trailblazers. That's certainly far less than their 17. They averaged just 18 points conceded off those turnovers, but 22 Chicago Bulls turnovers and 22 Blazers points off of them. Chicago wins the fast break points 20-18, followed by points in the paint, which goes to the Bulls as well, 60-54, and Portland's largest lead in this matchup was 7. Chicago's was 7. So ultimately, this is a big-time win for the Blazers starting off on this road trip. You look at the numbers, it was not Portland's, cleanest game as far as being able to shoot. Like I mentioned, 22% from deep. That's obviously not a great number, but the Blazers found a way to get a win, found a way to start the road trip off with a win. And I think going back to what we mentioned, the crucial point for the Blazers there in that third quarter when Tiago Splitter called the timeout after the Bulls kind of retook that lead there early in the third, and I think I identify that moment as where the Blazers were kind of able to circle the wagons a little bit, figure out how best to deal with this kind of pesky Chicago Bulls team, and from there they were able to kind of play a little bit more disciplined, as I mentioned, on both ends of the floor, and fight for the shots they needed to get, and going back to the free throws, you got to credit Jeremy Grant in this one. He had 12 of 14 from the line, and that highlights because he got to the line a lot more than any other Blazer. Blake Wesley had 6 attempts, and Toumani Camara had 6 attempts, but elsewhere, just no more than 2 attempts or 1 attempt for anybody else on the roster. So a big-time win for the Blazers in that regard, just finding a way to start off the road trip with a victory. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break here on the 5th quarter. When we come back, we'll be getting you guys ready for the drive of the night. We'll also be joined by Blazers Network host Chad Doing, as we'll be getting Chad's thoughts on this 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. Obviously, it was big for the Portland Trailblazers to start off this road trip with a win. They've still got many more winnable games on this road trip. How many more can the Blazers stack up, the momentum they can build, and more as well? I'm also excited to get Chad's thoughts on Vit Krejci. I thought it was one of his better nights tonight as well. Plus, we'll look ahead to what's to come here from Tiago Splitter and much, much more here on the 5th quarter with Brendan Slaughter. We'll be right back here on 620 Rip City Radio. Welcome back into the fifth quarter. Brendan Slaughter here with you as we are going to hear our drive of the night featuring Toumani Camara's Tomahawk Jam.
Now Holiday's got it. Slows it down. Gives up to Camara. Drives and jams it down with the right hand. Cocked it back and threw it down in the face of Leonard Miller. 9-point Trailblazers lead. They've scored 7 in a row. It's their largest lead of the game.
Big-time moment for the Trailblazers there. It was their largest lead of the game at that point in the third quarter. Toumani Camara, big-time night, 36 minutes played, 16 points. He goes 4 of 14 from the floor, but 6 of 6 from the foul line, 5 boards, and 2 assists. A big-time shot there and drive from Toumani Camara, obviously, as he played a big role for the Trailblazers. The fifth quarter drive of the night is presented by McCord's Vancouver Toyota, where they live by the slogan, "We make it easy." Check out their inventory now at vancouvertoyota.com. Back here on the fifth quarter, Brendan Slaughter here with you, breaking down Portland's 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. Want to bring in Chad Doing, Trailblazers Network host. Chad Doing, my brother, what's going on? Big-time win for the Blazers to open this road trip.
Yeah, it was, brother. They needed that game. They knew going in, just like we had talked about, winnable games, especially the first 4 on the road trip. So you want to make sure you get off to a good start against a team that lost 10 straight. I thought they came out a little bit slow on offense, but as the game went along, we saw the pressure from the small lineup, their defense creating some opportunities tonight. They forced a number of turnovers, and then they had different guys step up. But Jeremy Grant, once again, understanding, his role, whether it's been off the bench or in the starting lineup, just, big play after big play. And I love his aggressiveness, the way he continues to attack the rim or shoot the three. He is really bought in, and I thought he was big time tonight. But that was a quality win for the Blazers, who now can move forward to the back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday with some confidence coming off the win against Chicago.
Yeah, it was a big-time win to open the road trip. Obviously, the first of 5 on the road for the Trailblazers. They're at Charlotte next, and Chad brought up some great points there, folks. Obviously, Jeremy Grant leading the way with 27 points. He was big, including 12 made at the foul line tonight. He also made 3 three-pointers. Chad, obviously, coming into the game, we didn't know the status of Donovan Clingan, the illness. They kept him on the shelf tonight, and they elected to go small. Toumani Camara got the start at center, and I wouldn't have necessarily expected Portland to still significantly win the offensive rebounding battle with Donovan Clingan out, but I think that says a lot to how the Blazers have multiple guys and how they have that kind of team effort rebounding tonight.
Yeah, and that was one of the keys you mentioned before the game was, kind of a collective effort with the rebounding, and that's what we got. I also like the response. They gave up 11 straight in the second quarter, and the Bulls took a 7-point lead, but the Blazers able to close the half on a 25-12 run. Their defense, really led the charge there, and so they took control of the game. And even after the Bulls used that 9-2 run to open up the third, Portland had a response and ended up closing the quarter on an 18-11 run to take the advantage going into the fourth. I thought that was nice. The Blazers fans, they've been critical at times of the training staff because of the number of injuries. But I think if you look at the work that they've done with Robert Williams III to get him to a point where they figured out his minutes. They don't let him play in second of back-to-backs, and he's been healthy throughout the year. Ultra productive tonight with 14 points and 14 rebounds, and he's been terrific, defensively as well. But I thought his play, especially setting the tone, rebounding-wise, some of his plays at the rim, he did a great job of filling some of that void without Donovan Clingan in the lineup. And then, just that collective effort that you talked about from the guys, helping, with the rebounding and then, the quickness on defense. Even Blake Wesley got in tonight, made a solid impact. Vit Krejci, 8 guys in double figures. That was a team effort on a night when they needed it most with Avdija and Clingan out of the lineup.
Most certainly, and I'm glad you highlighted Robert Williams III, Chad, because I thought it was one of his better games of the season, considering that the Blazers at times just needed somebody big in there, a rim protector, not to say that Toumani isn't, but just a bigger body and some more size, and he responds with, 14 points, 14 boards, and 3 blocks. I thought it was a big-time game for Rob in that regard. But I also wanted to ask you, Chad, about Vit Krejci. I thought it was one of Vit's, if not maybe his best game, as a Blazer so far, and I think he looked comfortable in the offense. He ended up with 14 points, including 3 made three-pointers. What did you like from Vit in this one?
Well, I thought he was really active on both ends, defensively and then on offense. At times, finding his teammates with the pass. He attacked the rim a couple of times, not just settling for the three. But, I think the biggest thing he brings to the lineup is that, and Coach Splitters talked about this, but it's the gravity. When he's on the floor, you've got to respect his ability to hit the three because he shoots it at over 40%. So it provides that spacing. And then when you have that open floor, it allows for guys like Holiday and Scoot, like we saw tonight, to put the ball on the floor and attack the paint. And they were able to do that. They got their paint touches. They were able to get to the foul line. But Vit Krejci, with the gravity he brings to the floor and the respect, it just adds more spacing, and it allows for some of the guys with the ball in their hands to create for their teammates. So Krejci was great tonight, and I agree. I think this was his best effort in a Trailblazer uniform up to this point.
What does it say too, Chad, as we're catching up with Chad Doing, Blazers Network host, for a few more minutes here on the fifth quarter? Appreciate everyone tuning in here on the fifth quarter. What does it say, Chad, that the Blazers were able to kind of grind out this win? Obviously, we talked about it going in. The Bulls, lost 10 in a row. We kind of assumed they were starting to trend towards the lottery, but they were perhaps a little bit more competitive, even, fouling down the end of the stretch, trying to prolong the game than maybe we thought. And what does it say that the Blazers kind of took that on and still managed to get the road win, one that we talked about was going to be crucial for this team? Okay, looks like we may have lost Chad Doing briefly there. We'll see if we can get Chad Doing back here on the fifth quarter. But nevertheless, Chad and I were just basically breaking down Portland's 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls, and ultimately just how big it was for the Trailblazers. They didn't shoot great in this game, just 22% from three-point range. The Bulls with 30%, 9 of 30. So neither team shot particularly great from beyond the arc in this game, but the Blazers were able to get just enough production to get the win, and it turned out to be a big one for the Trailblazers. And again, big thanks to Chad Doing for joining us there on the segment. Chad, appreciate you and talk to you soon. But let's go ahead and switch gears and move over to the NBA scoreboard report. Alrighty, folks, let's go ahead and take a look around the NBA and open up the scoreboard report. Again, starting with your Portland Trailblazers, getting the 121-112 win against the Chicago Bulls. The Sacramento Kings get a 130-120 win over the Dallas Mavericks. Houston Rockets top the Orlando Magic 113-108. San Antonio Spurs over the Brooklyn Nets 126-110. The Atlanta Hawks over the Washington Wizards 126-96. The 76ers top the Miami Heat 124-117. The Charlotte Hornets, who have been playing great basketball, cruise past the Indiana Pacers 133-109. And then a few games in relation to the Blazers. The Suns currently up on the Los Angeles Lakers 103-98. Obviously, if you're scoreboard watching, Blazers fans are wanting to see the Suns lose that game, and they are currently up on the Lakers by 5. And meanwhile, over in Los Angeles, I should say, the Suns are hosting the Lakers at home, but over for the Clippers, they trail the Timberwolves 44-38 at the half, and obviously that's a game of note for the Trailblazers as well, as they are looking for Clippers losses at this point as the Clippers trail them in the standings. But speaking of which, we can go ahead and take a look at the standings as well. The Portland Trailblazers currently 29-31, just 2.5 games back of the Golden State Warriors, and the Clippers 27-30. Blazers have 2 more in the win column, but 1 more in the loss column over the Clippers. That is half a game up on the LA Clippers. The NBA scoreboard report is powered by McCord's Vancouver Toyota, where they live by the slogan, we make it easy. Check out their inventory now at vancouvertoyota.com. Again, Trailblazers get the 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. Just a couple other things I wanted to highlight in this matchup before we go ahead and take a break and come back with the Coach's Corner and get back with Tiago Splitter. Much more still to come on the fifth quarter. And again, if you want to join the conversation, 503-248-0620, you can join the fifth quarter and talk about Portland's 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. We talked about the effectiveness of Jeremy Grant tonight, but I also wanted to highlight, Scoot Henderson. He had 12 points in this game. I thought Scoot played pretty good minutes in this game, getting kind of pushed into the starting lineup. He obviously went 0 of 5 from 3, as did Jrue Holiday, but those two guys had been shooting the ball pretty good as of recent. And then I wanted to highlight Chris Murray as well. Another game he's in the starting lineup, 10 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. I thought Chris Murray played solid ball as well. A couple other guys I was going to mention with Chad doing as well. And again, the production from many guys in the lineup tonight. We talked about how the Blazers had 8 players reach double-figure scoring in a game where you kind of have to grind out a win against a pesky Chicago Bulls team. Again, they fought a little bit harder than I think many would have expected them to fight in this one, but nevertheless, the Portland Trail Blazers get the 121-112 win, start off the road trip with a win, and now we'll look ahead to what's to come. Obviously, matchups with Charlotte, Atlanta, Memphis, and Houston still on the horizon. We'll go ahead and be breaking that down a little bit later in the show, but we'll go ahead and take a quick break here on the 5th quarter. When we come back, we'll be hearing from head coach Tiago Splitter. We'll also be handing out a game ball and much, much more here on the 5th quarter. Make sure you stay locked into 620 Rip City Radio. Brendan Slaughter here on the 5th quarter. We'll talk to you guys here in just a moment. Welcome back into the fifth quarter. Brendan Slaughter here with you following Portland's 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. The Blazers start off their 5-game road trip with a win in Chicago. It was a bit of a more of a grittier game than you would have expected for the Bulls, who had lost 10 in a row coming into this matchup. The Bulls definitely made the Blazers work for this one, but behind Jeremy Grant and a team effort tonight for the Trailblazers, as we mentioned, 8 players score double figures. The Blazers get the 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. Let's go ahead and head to the coach's corner. We'll be hearing from acting head coach Thiago Splitter following this win over the Bulls.
It just every game is different and defense are different. Some defenses pack the paint more than others, so you just gotta be smart and take care of the ball.
That was acting head coach Thiago Splitter. Bit of a short interview for Thiago on the road tonight. And again, the Blazers were able to, fight through what was a much tougher game than I think they expected, coming in. Obviously, you don't know how to gauge a team that's lost 10 in a row. Chad and I talked about it pregame. This team had lost 10 in a row. We kind of figured they were starting to lean in towards the lottery, but yet they were oddly more competitive than I would have expected. Obviously, the Blazers kind of rolling with a different lineup. When you don't have your big man there in the middle, Donovan Clingan, it kind of definitely throws guys into different roles and what have you. But I think overall, the Blazers were able to respond to that well. Every night is still tough in the NBA, regardless of who you play. Guys are in the league for a reason, and we've seen that, right, earlier this year where we've seen the Blazers maybe lose to a team that didn't have their full complement of guys. It was a bit of a surprising, result, what have you, and I think it kind of shows the growth of the Trailblazers to know what they needed to do to get this win and know what they needed to do to start off this road trip with a win. I remember hearing from Jrue Holiday back in Blazers game day where he was talking about starting off the road trip, strong and winning the road trip, quote, and Portland, obviously 5 games. You're going to be looking to go 3-2 to, quote, have a winning road trip. Blazers have started that well with this win over Chicago, and then we'll obviously shift gears now and start looking ahead to the matchup with the Charlotte Hornets on Saturday. And make sure you stay locked into Blazers game day, which will be starting at 8 a.m. on Saturday. I'll be on the call for that one. Blazers game day and the fifth quarter. Still filling in for Chris Burkhart as the Blazers take on the Charlotte Hornets. And what's going to be definitely a get your coffee kind of a morning game, right? We don't see too many 10 a.m. Blazers games. I can remember, a handful of early tips, on various, days throughout the year. Sometimes when the Blazers go to the East Coast, an early game like this will happen. Sometimes a noon game on a Sunday. I think I remember a pretty early game against Boston a few years back, but 10 a.m. still pretty early, right? It reminds me of almost the summer in the bubble where the Blazers were playing games at 10, 11, noon, and it definitely is a different feel, and hopefully the Blazers can, kind of adjust the body clocks a little bit for playing at 10 a.m. Portland time, but that'll be coming up on Saturday. Make sure, again, you stay locked into Blazers game day. I'll have game day at 8, Chad Doing will have the pregame show at 9, and then Travis Demers will have the call starting at 10 a.m. Blazers will then go from Charlotte to Atlanta, take on the Hawks, starting at 3 o'clock on Sunday, the 1st of March. Continue the road trip down in Memphis, and then wrap up the road trip against Houston before returning home to Moda Center to face the Indiana Pacers on March the 8th. So once again, the Blazers start the road trip 1-0. You look at the next 3 teams on the ledger. Charlotte playing some really good basketball right now. The Hornets, have really rallied around, on Knuppel and how he's been playing so far this year. They're a solid team, LaMelo Ball, so on and so forth, and that's going to be a tough challenge for the Blazers. Charlotte's starting to put some things together, but at the same token, taking a look at the standings, Charlotte is 29-31, just like your Portland Trailblazers. You want to talk about an even-ish matchup as far as it goes. Charlotte obviously going to have the home court advantage, but that is the definition of a winnable game for the Trailblazers. Following, they'll go to Atlanta, and again, same kind of thing. Looking at where the Hawks are right now, Atlanta is one position better than the Hornets in the East. They check in 9th, 30-31 on the year. So again, another winnable game for the Trailblazers. They then travel to Memphis. That's shifting gears to the Western Conference. Memphis currently 11th in the West at 21-36, but Portland just beat Memphis a pair of times before the All-Star break, so that's obviously another winnable game for the Trailblazers before they wrap up in Houston. And Houston's going to be a tough matchup no matter what. Kevin Durant and company down there. The two games Portland were able to snag from the Rockets here earlier this season at Moda Center were huge. You know Houston's going to be ready for that matchup. But the reality is, I think starting off with a win here in Chicago, I think, at a bare minimum, you can look at the Blazers trying to go 3-2 on this road trip as being a win. If you want to get a little greedy, maybe 4-1. That would be obviously stellar for the Blazers as they sit 2 games under 500, but we'll just have to take it game by game and ultimately see how things flesh themselves out for the Trailblazers. But again, the Blazers with a 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. Let's go ahead and hand out a game ball from tonight's victory. Welcome back into the fifth quarter. We're going to be handing out a game ball from tonight's 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls for the Portland Trailblazers. They started off the road trip 1-0 and are 29-31 on the year. They improved to 13-16 away from Moda Center. And truthfully, I'd like to give the game ball to the team tonight, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. This was a team performance. Obviously, Jeremy Grant led the way in scoring for the Blazers with 27 points, but this is a team victory. As we mentioned, 8 players reached double figures for the Blazers scoring in this one. Everyone chipped in this game throughout the lineup, and I think that was huge for the Trailblazers in a game where they didn't have Donovan Clingan in the middle. They don't have Shaedon Sharpe, as we know he's on the shelf, going to be reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks, and then Denny Avdia, who's still working his way back from the back injury. So when you don't have all that production, and then you don't add Donovan Clingan in there as well, that obviously changes some things up for the Trailblazers, and I really thought that their ability to play as a team tonight and get this win in very team fashion was indicative of their success tonight, and a big reason why they got the 121-112 win over the Chicago Bulls. So that'll go ahead and wrap it up for this edition of the fifth quarter. Again, make sure you stay locked into the fifth quarter with myself, or let me rephrase, locked into Blazers game day with myself for Portland's next matchup against the Charlotte Hornets on Saturday. As I mentioned, Blazers game day will be getting kicked off at 8 a.m. that morning, so grab your coffee, grab your hot chocolate, join me for some morning Blazers basketball. Blazers are going to be getting things underway at 10 a.m. Chad Dewing will have the pregame at 9 on the Blazers Network, and then Travis Demers with the call at 10. Game number 2 of this 5-game trip that will also feature matchups at Atlanta, Memphis, and Houston before your Blazers are back in the friendly confines of Moda Center on Sunday, March the 8th. Rip City, you have been great. Look forward to talking to you guys for Blazers game day ahead of the matchup with the Charlotte Hornets, where Portland will be looking to make this road trip 2-0 against the Hornets.